You wake up at the same time every morning, and before your feet even touch the floor, your mind is already racing. The alarm pierces through whatever dream you were having, yanking you back into what feels like an endless cycle of obligations. You reach for your phone with that familiar knot already forming in your stomach, knowing that the first thing you'll see are notifications demanding your immediate attention. Emails from work that arrived while you slept, news headlines designed to trigger your anxiety, social media posts that make you feel like you're falling behind in some invisible competition you never agreed to join. By the time you've scrolled for just 5 minutes, you've already absorbed more stress than our ancestors dealt with in weeks. You rush through a shower while mentally rehearsing the presentations you need to give, the deadlines you need to meet, the people you need to impress. Your breakfast, if you even have one, is consumed while standing in the kitchen, checking more emails, planning your route to avoid traffic, calculating exactly how many minutes you have before you'll be considered late. By the time you're dressed and grabbing coffee, you've already calculated how many hours until the weekend, how many days until your next vacation, how many years until retirement. Every single moment of your present existence is being sacrificed to some imaginary future when you'll finally be allowed to breathe, to rest, to simply be. Sound familiar? I know it does, because I've been there too. Trapped in that suffocating rhythm that modern life mistakes for living, that feeling of waking up tired even after sleeping, of being busy every moment yet somehow accomplishing nothing that feels truly meaningful. That sensation of being constantly behind, constantly stressed, constantly bracing yourself for the next demand on your time and energy. You tell yourself, this is what being responsible looks like, what maturity demands, what success requires in the 21st century. You wear your exhaustion like a badge of honor, proof that you're taking life seriously, that you're not one of those irresponsible people who waste time on frivolous pursuits. But what if everything you've been taught about taking life seriously is actually the very thing stealing your soul? What if this relentless pursuit of productivity, achievement, and control is not making you more human, but less human? What if the weight of constant seriousness is severing you from the most essential part of your humanity, your capacity to experience wonder, transcendence, and what the great religious scholar Mircea Eliade called the sacred dimension of existence? What if the very thing you think is saving you is actually destroying the deepest, most vital part of who you are? There's a profound truth hidden in this modern tragedy, one that the Romanian scholar Mircea Eliade spent his entire life trying to reveal to us. Eliade lived through some of the darkest moments of the 20th century, witnessing firsthand how entire civilizations could lose their way when they forgot the sacred dimension of human existence. He understood something that our hyper-connected, hyper-productive, hyper-serious world has completely forgotten. The human soul needs sacred time, sacred space, and sacred meaning to truly live. Without these, we become what he called profane beings, creatures who exist but never truly inhabit their existence. We become people who are so busy managing life that we forget to experience it, so focused on optimizing our performance that we lose touch with our purpose. The weight of constant seriousness doesn't make us more responsible. It makes us spiritually reckless. It strips away our natural capacity for wonder, for spontaneous joy, for those moments of transcendence that lift us out of the grinding machinery of everyday survival and connect us to something larger, deeper, more meaningful than our immediate concerns. When everything becomes urgent, nothing is truly important. When every moment is scheduled and optimized, no moment is truly lived. When every experience is filtered through the lens of productivity and efficiency, we lose our ability to simply receive the gift of being alive. Eliade discovered that every human culture throughout history, from the ancient Mesopotamians to the indigenous peoples of Australia, from the medieval Christians to the Hindu traditions of India, understood something we've lost: the crucial difference between sacred time and profane time, between sacred space and ordinary space, between living and merely existing. They knew that life becomes unbearable when everything is treated with the same level of urgent seriousness. They understood that the soul has rhythms, seasons, natural cycles of expansion and contraction that must be honored if we want to remain fully human. These ancient peoples built intentional rhythms into their existence that allowed for celebration, contemplation, ritual, and renewal. They created festivals that interrupted the normal flow of work and worry, ceremonies that connected them to their ancestors and their descendants, practices that reminded them they were part of something vast and mysterious and beautiful. They understood that the soul needs Sabbaths not as rewards for hard work but as essential nourishment for the spirit. They knew that without regular access to what Eliade called sacred time, human beings begin to wither from the inside out. no matter how successful they might appear on the outside. But we've forgotten all of this wisdom. We've created a civilization that treats every moment as profane time, every space as ordinary space, every experience as raw material for productivity and achievement. We've lost the ability to recognize what Eliade called hierophanies, those moments when the sacred breaks through into ordinary reality and offers us a glimpse of something eternal, something that exists beyond the endless cycle of obligation and anxiety that we mistake for real life. When you take everything with equal seriousness, you create what Eliade called the terror of history. You become imprisoned by linear time, trapped in an endless march of responsibilities and deadlines and expectations that stretch out infinitely into the future without any promise of rest or relief or meaning. Every moment becomes weighted with the same level of importance, which paradoxically makes nothing truly important. The email you need to send becomes as significant as the sunset you're missing while you send it. The meeting you're rushing to attend carries the same urgency as the embrace from your child that you abbreviated because you were thinking about the meeting. The project you're working on late into the night takes on the same existential weight as the dreams you've stopped having because you're too tired to remember them. This isn't wisdom. It's a form of spiritual blindness that cuts you off from the very experiences that make life worth living. It's a kind of self-imposed exile from your own existence, a way of being so busy preparing for life that you forget to actually live it. You become like someone who spends so much time reading the menu that they never taste the food, so much time planning the trip that they never experience the journey, so much time optimizing their schedule that they never have time for spontaneous moments of joy or connection or wonder. When you take everything with equal seriousness, you create what Eliade called the terror of history. You become imprisoned by linear time, by the endless march of responsibilities and deadlines and expectations. Every moment becomes weighted with the same level of importance, which paradoxically makes nothing truly important. The email you need to send becomes as significant as the sunset you're missing while you send it. The meeting you're rushing to attend carries the same urgency as the embrace from your child that you abbreviated because you were thinking about the meeting. This isn't wisdom. It's a form of spiritual blindness that cuts you off from the very experiences that make life worth living. Think about the last time you felt truly alive, truly present, truly connected to something larger than your immediate concerns. I'm willing to bet it wasn't during a productivity meeting or while optimizing your daily schedule, or while checking items off your ever-expanding to-do list. It was probably during a moment when you accidentally stepped outside the profane time of constant doing and entered what Eliade called sacred time. Maybe it was watching a child discover something wonderful for the first time, their face lighting up with pure amazement at a butterfly or a soap bubble, or the way light dances on water. Maybe it was feeling unexpectedly moved by a piece of music that seemed to bypass your rational mind and speak directly to your soul. Maybe it was experiencing a moment of perfect silence in nature, when all the noise of civilization fell away and you could hear something deeper, something eternal that had been there all along, waiting for you to remember how to listen. In that moment, whatever it was, you weren't thinking about your to-do list or your 5-year plan or your performance metrics or your social media presence. You weren't analyzing or optimizing or strategizing or networking. You were simply being, and in that pure being, you touched something that exists beyond time, beyond worry, beyond the endless cycle of problem and solution that usually defines your existence. You experienced what every spiritual tradition has recognized as the deepest truth about human life. We are not just biological machines designed to solve problems and accumulate achievements. We are conscious beings capable of participating in something vast and mysterious and beautiful. Eliade called these experiences hierophanies, moments when the sacred breaks through the veil of ordinary reality and reveals itself to us. But here's what's crucial to understand about hierophanies. They don't happen to us despite our busy lives. They're actively prevented by our insistence on taking everything seriously all the time. When every moment is scheduled, every experience is optimized for maximum productivity. Every feeling is immediately analyzed for its practical implications. We create a kind of spiritual static that drowns out the subtle whispers of transcendence. We become so focused on managing our existence that we lose the capacity to simply experience it. The ancient world that Eliade studied so extensively knew something we've forgotten. Certain times and spaces must be kept sacred, deliberately set apart from the relentless demands of productivity and efficiency. The Jewish Sabbath wasn't just a day off work. It was a weekly rebellion against the tyranny of linear time, a deliberate step into sacred time where different rules applied, where being took precedence over doing, where the soul was allowed to remember its true nature. The Hindu festivals that punctuate the Indian calendar aren't just cultural traditions. They're sophisticated technologies of the spirit, designed to interrupt the flow of ordinary consciousness and create openings for transcendence. The Greek symposiums weren't just dinner parties. They were ritualized explorations of beauty, truth, and meaning that lifted participants out of their everyday concerns and connected them to eternal questions. The indigenous vision quests weren't just rites of passage. They were deliberate journeys into sacred space and sacred time, where young people could encounter their deeper purpose and their connection to the web of life that sustains us all. These weren't primitive superstitions or luxury activities for people who had already taken care of all their practical concerns. They were essential practices that these cultures understood were necessary for human flourishing, for psychological health, for spiritual vitality. They were ways of ensuring that people didn't lose their souls in the process of managing their lives, that they didn't become so focused on survival that they forgot what they were surviving for. But we've dismantled all of this ancient wisdom in favor of a worldview that treats efficiency as the highest virtue and productivity as the ultimate measure of human worth. We've created a civilization that has no time for Sabbaths, no space for contemplation, no tolerance for activities that don't produce measurable results. We've forgotten that the soul has needs that can't be quantified, that there are forms of nourishment that don't appear on any spreadsheet, that there are kinds of wealth that can't be accumulated or optimized or leveraged for competitive advantage. And the result is exactly what Eliade predicted it would be. A culture of people who are incredibly busy but spiritually starving, impressively productive but deeply miserable, constantly connected but profoundly alone. We've gained the whole world of technological capability and lost our souls in the process. We can communicate instantly with people on the other side of the planet, but we've forgotten how to be present with the people sitting right next to us. We can access unlimited information, but we've lost touch with ancient wisdom. We can optimize almost every aspect of our external lives, but we have no idea how to nourish our inner lives. You know what touches me most when I read your messages? It's realizing that we're not alone in this search. If you're listening to me now and feel that emptiness, that sensation that something important is missing in your life, I want you to know that I understand exactly what you're going through. There were moments when I also felt completely disconnected from the sacred, lost in the midst of a routine that seemed to suck all the magic out of existence. That's why I want to ask you a very direct question. What was the last moment you felt there was something greater than yourself present in your life? It could have been contemplating a sunset, listening to music, or simply in an instant of silence. If you feel comfortable, write in the comments, "I miss the sacred in my daily life," and briefly tell when that last moment was. Your story might be exactly what someone needs to read today to feel less alone in this journey. And I promise I'll read each comment with the care it deserves. But let's go deeper into what this means for your actual daily existence, because Eliade's insights aren't just abstract philosophical concepts. They're practical keys to recovering your spiritual vitality in the middle of modern life. Eliade discovered that traditional cultures created what he called sacred space, physical and temporal zones where different rules applied, where the urgent gave way to the eternal, where doing gave way to being, where the soul could remember its true nature. These weren't escapes from reality. They were gateways to a deeper reality, doorways to dimensions of existence that are always present, but usually hidden by the noise and rush of ordinary consciousness. When you enter sacred space, whether it's a cathedral that has been blessed by centuries of prayer, a forest clearing where you can hear the ancient rhythms of the natural world, or simply a quiet corner of your home where you've learned to be still and present, you step out of profane time and into what Eliade called the time of origins, the eternal now, where creation is always happening, where possibility is always present, where your soul can remember what it's like to be alive rather than just busy. Sacred space isn't necessarily about religious buildings or formal rituals, though these can certainly serve that function. Sacred space is any environment where you allow yourself to shift from the consciousness of doing to the consciousness of being, from the mind that's always solving problems to the awareness that can simply witness and appreciate the mystery of existence. It might be the corner of your garden where you sit quietly with your morning coffee, really tasting it instead of gulping it while checking emails. It might be the chair by your window where you watch the light change throughout the day, noticing the subtle shifts in color and shadow that usually go unobserved. It might be the walking path where you've learned to move without destination, allowing your body to remember its natural rhythm instead of forcing it to match the frantic pace of your mental schedule. The tragedy of modern life isn't that we're too busy, it's that we've forgotten how to be appropriately busy. busy and appropriately still. We've lost the rhythm that makes human existence sustainable and meaningful. Everything has become urgent, which means nothing is truly important. Everything has become serious, which means we've lost our capacity for the kind of playful engagement with existence that actually allows us to accomplish meaningful things. When you treat checking email with the same level of intensity as holding your newborn child, you're not being responsible. You're being spiritually reckless. You're collapsing distinctions that are essential for psychological health and spiritual vitality. Eliade wrote extensively about what he called the myth of the eternal return, the understanding that life is not a straight line of endless progress towards some imaginary future fulfillment, but a spiral of seasons, of natural cycles of activity and rest, of engagement and withdrawal, of work and celebration, of striving and surrendering. The ancients knew that trying to maintain the same level of intense seriousness all the time was not just exhausting, it was spiritually destructive. They built festivals into their calendars not as rewards for hard work, but as necessary moments of renewal that made hard work possible and meaningful. Consider how indigenous cultures approached time before they were overwhelmed by industrial civilization. They had seasons for planting and seasons for harvest, seasons for hunting and seasons for storytelling, seasons for work and seasons for ceremony, seasons for solitude and seasons for community. They understood that consciousness itself has seasons, that the soul needs times of expansion and times of contraction, times of doing and times of being, times of speaking and times of listening. They didn't see these as opposites, but as complementary aspects of a larger wholeness, different notes in the grand symphony of human existence. The sacred wasn't separate from the ordinary. It was the hidden dimension that gave the ordinary its meaning and vitality. When they planted seeds, they weren't just engaging in agriculture, they were participating in the cosmic process of creation. When they told stories around the fire, they weren't just entertaining themselves, they were transmitting the deepest truths about the nature of reality from one generation to the next. When they created art, they weren't just making decorative objects, they were making visible the invisible patterns that connect all things. This is what we've lost in our rush toward efficiency and optimization. We've reduced life to its most superficial dimensions, treating everything as if it were merely material, merely practical, merely a means to some other end. We've forgotten that every moment contains both visible and invisible dimensions, that every activity can be either merely profane or deeply sacred, depending on the consciousness we bring to it. When you live entirely in profane time, when every moment is scheduled and every experience is optimized for maximum productivity, you create what Eliade called the experience of living in a completely desacralized world. You might be incredibly busy and impressively productive. You might accumulate achievements and recognition and material success, but you're spiritually starving. You're like someone who has learned to consume calories efficiently, but has forgotten what it means to taste food, to savor a meal, to experience nourishment as something more than fuel for more activity. You become what Eliade called modern man, the human being who has lost contact with the sacred dimension of existence and doesn't even realize what's missing. Modern man can build skyscrapers and split atoms and send messages instantly around the world, but he can't find meaning in a sunrise or peace in a moment of silence or wonder in the face of a flower. He has gained incredible power over the external world, but lost touch with the inner world that gives external achievements their significance. But here's where the wisdom becomes practical, where ancient insight meets modern possibility, where Eliade's profound understanding can transform your everyday experience. You don't need to abandon your responsibilities or retreat to a monastery to reclaim your connection to sacred time and sacred space. You don't need to reject technology or withdraw from society or adopt some exotic spiritual practice that has nothing to do with your actual life circumstances. What you need to learn is the difference between what requires your serious attention and what requires your playful presence, between what deserves your focused effort and what calls for your open receptivity. You need to create intentional boundaries between profane time and sacred time, not as an escape from life, but as a way of engaging with life more fully and more sustainably. You need to remember that you are not just a problem-solving machine, but a conscious being capable of wonder, of gratitude, of spontaneous joy, of moments of transcendence that connect you to something larger than your individual concerns. This might mean setting aside time each day for what Eliade would recognize as contemplative practice, not necessarily formal meditation, but any activity that allows you to step outside the flow of linear time and connect with something eternal. It might be gardening, where you participate in the ancient rhythm of growth and decay, where you remember that you're part of the same natural cycles that govern the seasons, the tides, the movement of stars across the sky. It might be cooking with full attention, engaging in the primordial act of transformation and nourishment, turning simple ingredients into something that feeds not just the body, but the soul. It might be walking without destination, allowing your legs to remember their natural rhythm while your mind releases its grip on planning and control. It might be reading poetry that bypasses rational understanding and speaks directly to your deeper knowing, or listening to music with such complete attention that you disappear into the sound and emerge refreshed, renewed, reconnected to your essential nature. The key insight from Eliade's lifelong study of human spiritual experience is that these aren't luxuries or self-indulgences, they're spiritual necessities. Without regular access to sacred time and sacred space, the human soul begins to wither from the inside out. You might continue to function, to meet your obligations, to check off your tasks, to impress your colleagues and maintain your social status, but you lose touch with the deeper currents of meaning and purpose that make all that activity worthwhile. You become what Eliade called Homo economicus rather than Homo religiosus, a creature defined by productivity rather than presence, by having rather than being, by consuming rather than experiencing, by accumulating rather than appreciating. If this resonates with you, if you recognize yourself in this description of spiritual exhaustion disguised as responsibility, then let me suggest something that might feel revolutionary in our current cultural context. What if today, you gave yourself permission to take some things less seriously? Not irresponsibly, not with careless neglect of your genuine obligations, but with the recognition that not everything deserves the same level of intense focus. What if you allowed yourself to remember that you are not just a machine for solving problems, but a conscious being, capable of wonder, of gratitude, of spontaneous moments of joy that arise when you're not trying to manufacture them? What if you created small moments of sacred time throughout your day, brief escapes from the relentless pressure of optimization and efficiency? What if you remembered that some of the most important things in life, love, beauty, meaning, transcendence, wonder, peace can't be scheduled or optimized or achieved through effort? They can only be received with an open heart, appreciated with a quiet mind, experienced when you're present enough to notice that they're already here, already available, already flowing through your life like an underground river that you've simply forgotten how to access. Eliade understood that the sacred doesn't demand that you take everything seriously. It demands that you take the right things seriously and allow everything else to be held more lightly. It demands that you remember you are not just a doer but a being, not just a producer, but a conscious participant in the mystery of existence. When you recover this understanding, when you learn to move gracefully between sacred and profane time, between serious engagement and playful presence, you don't become less effective, you become more human. You don't accomplish less, you accomplish what matters from a place of deeper wisdom and sustainable energy. The seriousness that's destroying your soul isn't authentic seriousness. It's anxiety disguised as responsibility, control disguised as care, fear disguised as diligence. True seriousness knows when to be serious and when to let go, when to strive and when to surrender, when to hold on and when to release. It knows that some things are worth your full attention and commitment, and other things are worth your gentle, playful, appreciative engagement. It knows that the soul needs both challenge and rest, both effort and ease, both doing and being, both time and timelessness. This is what Eliade meant when he wrote about the importance of maintaining access to what he called primordial time, the time before clocks and schedules and endless obligations, the time when humans lived in harmony with natural rhythms and understood that consciousness itself has seasons. You can't go back to living in that primordial world, and probably wouldn't want to even if you could, but you can learn to visit it regularly, to draw from its wisdom, and allow it to inform how you navigate the complexities of modern existence. You can learn to carry sacred time with you into profane time, to bring the consciousness of being into the world of doing. So here's my invitation to you, my gentle challenge to your assumptions about what it means to live responsibly in the 21st century. What if today you conducted a small experiment in sacred time? What if you chose one activity, something you normally rush through while thinking about what comes next, and gave it your full, unhurried, appreciative attention? What if you ate a meal without checking your phone, allowing yourself to actually taste the food, to notice the colors and textures and flavors that usually go unobserved? What if you took a walk without listening to a podcast or making phone calls, simply allowing yourself to notice what's happening in your immediate environment? What if you had a conversation without mentally preparing your next response, actually listening to what the other person is saying instead of waiting for your turn to speak? What if you allowed yourself to experience the revolutionary act of being fully present for your own life, even if just for a few minutes, even if it feels awkward at first, even if your mind keeps trying to pull you back into the familiar territory of worry and planning and optimization? What if you discovered that presence itself is a form of prayer, that attention itself is a spiritual practice, that the simple act of being awake to what's actually happening right now is the doorway to the sacred that you've been seeking in all the wrong places? This isn't about becoming less responsible or abandoning your commitments or neglecting your genuine obligations to the people you love and the work that matters to you. It's about recognizing that the most important commitment you have is to your own soul, to your capacity for wonder and gratitude and joy and peace. When you honor that commitment, when you create space for the sacred in your daily existence, everything else becomes easier, more meaningful, more sustainable. You don't have less energy for your responsibilities, you have more energy, because that energy is now flowing from a deeper source, a source that doesn't depend on caffeine or willpower or the adrenaline of constant urgency. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you recognizes that there's a different path, a deeper way to understand your own spiritual journey. I know what it's like to feel lost amid so much noise of the modern world, seeking answers that always seem to slip through your fingers just when you think you've grasped them. That's why I created this space, this refuge where we can explore together the ancient wisdom that still pulses alive in our hearts, waiting to be remembered, waiting to be integrated into our contemporary lives. When you subscribe to this channel, you're not just clicking a button or consuming more content, you're joining a community of people who, like you, feel that life has deeper layers waiting to be discovered, richer meanings waiting to be explored, more profound possibilities for peace and joy and wonder than our culture usually acknowledges. Here you'll find not just knowledge but genuine embrace for your thirst for meaning, practical guidance for integrating timeless wisdom into modern circumstances, and the reminder that you're not alone in feeling that there must be more to existence than the endless cycle of work and worry that passes for normal life in our time. Subscribe now and be part of this journey of rediscovering the sacred in everyday life, of learning to move gracefully between the demands of contemporary existence and the timeless needs of the human soul. Your soul deserves this gift, this recognition, this patient cultivation of what matters most. Eliade spent his life studying how different cultures throughout history have maintained their connection to the sacred while still engaging with the practical demands of existence. His conclusion was both simple and revolutionary. The secret is not to choose between sacred and profane, between being and doing, between rest and work, between contemplation and action, but to learn how to dance gracefully between them. The secret is to understand that your life is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be experienced, not a test to be passed, but a mystery to be explored, not a machine to be optimized, but a consciousness to be cultivated and appreciated. The seriousness that serves you is the seriousness that knows when to be serious and when to play, when to strive and when to surrender, when to hold on and when to let go, when to plan and when to trust. This is the seriousness of someone who understands that they are both human and divine, both limited and infinite, both a temporary visitor to this world and an eternal participant in something vast and mysterious and beautiful that exists beyond time, beyond worry, beyond the small concerns that usually occupy our attention. Today, right now in this very moment, you have the opportunity to step out of profane time and into sacred time, to remember that beneath all your obligations and worries and plans, you are a conscious being capable of experiencing wonder, of touching the eternal, of participating in the ongoing creation of the world. You don't need permission from anyone else to claim this birthright. You don't need to wait until you've completed all your tasks or solved all your problems or figured out your entire life. The sacred is available to you right now, in this moment, in this breath, in this recognition that you are alive and awake and capable of experiencing the extraordinary gift of existence itself.